Hello, I'm Paul Zimmy Finn, and this is the Generation Report. Imagine you're on a passenger ship sailing across the ocean late at night. You're walking one of the illuminated passenger decks, looking on as the inside of the ship bustles with activity. Card games, cigars, waiters circulating, music, dancing. As you walk the deck, the din of sound from inside combines with the sensory intake outside. The splashing of waves, the occasional waft of a smoke, the black sea almost indistinguishable from the black sky. It's serene. Now imagine a minute or so later, your ship hits an iceberg. Slowly but surely, you and the other passengers confront what has happened. Small clusters of people who are traveling together form inside and on each deck, and following suit, you find your group. Every group chats nervously as they await instructions. The crew man their positions, and gradually, the anxiety begins to boil over, within you and all around you. Neither you nor any of the other passengers saw this catastrophe coming. Not when you booked your passage, not when you boarded at your various ports of call, and certainly not when you were whiling away in personal pleasures just a few minutes before. When the rest of the world wakes up the next morning, the confusion and chaos will resemble this scene. Everyone else thought your ship was unsinkable too. We all recognize this story. Like many of the most seismic and tragic events in history, the Titanic's sinking on its maiden voyage was foreseen by almost no one. Even the possibility that the largest, most luxurious ship of its time could sink at all seemed remote. When it did sink, the reaction around the world was enormous, and fascination with the tragedy sustains to this day. Events like the sinking of the Titanic have been conferred with a name: Black Swans. The use of Black Swan as a label for seemingly implausible outliers began centuries ago, but emerged in contemporary use through a book of the same title by the trader and academic Nassim Nicholas Taleb in 2007. In The Black Swan, Taleb gives a Black Swan event 3 essential criteria. Number 1, rarity. It is an outlier lying, quote, outside the realm of regular expectations because nothing in the past can convincingly point to its possibility, unquote. Number 2, extreme impact. Number 3, retrospective but not prospective predictability. Quote, in spite of its outlier status, human nature concocts explanations for its occurrence after the fact, making it explainable and predictable, unquote. As an options trader, Taleb had already by 2007 amassed a small fortune by astutely predicting financial disruptions, most notably the Black Monday Wall Street crash of 1987. What shot Taleb to worldwide fame, however, was his assessment in The Black Swan, on the eve of the events of 2008, that America's banking structure had become, quote, more vulnerable to the Black Swan than ever before, unquote. Bingo. The concepts explored in The Black Swan spread far and wide in the years after the global financial crisis. Suddenly, the language of risk management was in common use throughout the media and academia and among policy thinkers, no longer confined mostly to finance and corporate management structures. Taleb's framework and narrative presented in The Black Swan, however, are not without contradictions and misapplications. Just as Taleb insists, quote, a small number of black swans explain almost everything in our world, unquote, and cannot be predicted because they are, quote-unquote, unknown unknowns, he elaborates on how 1987's Black Monday, a disruption he predicted, was a black swan. Taleb advises his reader to prepare for the future braced with awareness that the world is steeped in randomness and is becoming ever more complex and unpredictable. The counsel he gives to remain flexible, maneuverable, and skeptical amid that uncertainty is well taken. But what is the vital trajectory of that unforeseen chain of events the reader should anticipate? The Black Swan doesn't really say. It offers general predictions about social and economic trends and cautions against resorting to oversimplification and faulty narratives. Taleb doesn't realize that preparing for random extreme changes at uncertain times without a vital trajectory is analogous to hiking alone in the deep woods with a well-stocked survival kit missing its compass. You may have the means to successfully start a fire from scratch or fight off a bear attack, but good luck getting out of the woods. There is another issue with this line of advice. It tacitly casts every person as an island unto themselves as they navigate through events, implying that people never adjust their behavior according to their phase of life, the mood of their social environment, or the needs of the community of people around them, and that does not hold. The cycle of history presented in the fourth turning demonstrates that individuals have vital trajectories inseparable from their phase of life, the evolution of the social environment during their life cycle, and the generation they belong to. Furthermore, the cycle of history ensures that generations have vital trajectories inseparable from their society's vital trajectory, and that a society's vital trajectory is inseparable from where it lies in the saeculum at any given moment in time. Even though we cannot possibly foretell exactly what will happen in the future, we can ascertain the vital trajectory of that future and how it will impact all our lives, given where we are in the cycle of history. Those who profess that history is entirely random, such as Taleb, continually disregard these connections. Small wonder, then, that Taleb has professed he finds no value in the subject of history. In The Black Swan, he describes it as an exercise in retrospective reverse engineering, something which is, quote, certainly not a place to derive general knowledge, unquote, that acts only as a, quote-unquote, mirror for self-serving narratives. Clearly, Taleb has never read The Fourth Turning. Or, at least, he had not when he wrote The Black Swan. Here is how this applies to forecasting approaches and to current events. Taleb asserted last week that the coronavirus pandemic is not a black swan, and this is consistent with his forecast in the book's second edition that the spread of a, quote, very strange acute virus throughout the planet, unquote, was becoming more likely thanks to increasing global connectivity. Fair enough. As further testament to its lacking total unpredictability, many public officials, doctors, infectious disease experts, and others around the world proclaimed the rising likelihood of a global pandemic over the past several years. It's important, however, to make a clear and precise distinction between the framework Taleb uses to categorize and foresee future events in The Black Swan and the framework Strauss and Howe apply to do the same in The Fourth Turning. Taleb's approach to predicting the future in The Black Swan includes the following precepts. Number 1, quote, the only way you can imagine a future similar to the past is by assuming it will be an exact projection of it, unquote. Number 2, quote, to understand the future to the point of being able to predict it, you need to incorporate elements from this future itself, unquote. Number 3, quote, Black Swan asymmetry allows you to be confident about what is wrong, not about what you believe is right, unquote. This forecasting approach can work in assessing potentials for disruption in financial markets and other complex systems, as Taleb's remarkable records of insight in these domains testify. However, this approach's capacity to provide insight into what any disruption's role might be in the larger flow of events is conspicuously limited because it presupposes that history is random. If all of time and history truly were random, any event, black swan or not, could bring any kind of social impact. This pandemic could just as easily bring back the age of Aquarius as provide an impetus for community and institutional rebirth. The 1987 stock market crash could have just as easily catalyzed a crisis era as the 1929 and 2008 market crashes did. But if you've read The Fourth Turning and/or listened to most of this series so far, you know the evolution of history through the events which happen around us is not random. Complex systems can experience disruptions at a variety of times and in any number of different ways, but it is people who drive social change. Even though it is not a black swan according to Taleb's criteria, this pandemic is an event that promises to bring massive social change. The Black Swan's most declarative assertion about history provides the clearest insight into how its author views the discipline. Quote, in the end, we are being driven by history, all the while thinking that we are doing the driving, unquote. Stretching the logic within this statement to its conclusion, you could be forgiven for thinking that all of history consisted of unaware Titanics ramming into unseen icebergs, and occasionally of lucky leprechauns being beamed by pots of gold falling from the sky. Of course, we know this isn't so. Yes, history is filled with accidents and seismic transformations over which we exercise little or no control. The vital trajectory of where history leads, however, always rests with people, not black swans. Remember, a person was at the wheel of the Titanic, too. In the end, The Fourth Turning gets history right. History is seasonal, and we are the ones driving. Please tune in to the next episode. At long last, finally, and by popular demand, the breaking up of men and women in America. Thank you for listening, and stay safe.